Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a show on the Disney Channel directed towards children.
In my mouth! I want it in my mouth!
Put it in your mouth. Do it!
No! Dear.
Blow it!
Never you get it away from me!
Here you
Get
blow!
that whistle away from me!
Oh, I've got plenty of taint. Oh, I've got plenty of taint.
Oh, I've got plenty of taint.
Throughout this video I'll be talking as if I assume you're familiar with the show, and if you aren't, I don't really care. But just in case, here are the main things you need to know. Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a show on the Disney Channel about a magical princess who comes from a different dimension called Muni, where humans are called Mumins. She has infinite magical powers, and she needs to learn how to control them, but doesn't because she's stupid, and gets sent away by her parents along with her reality-destroying wand through a hole that they open with a magical pair of scissors over to Earth so she can cause primary damage here instead of her own kingdom because her parents are sick of her because she's such a giant cunt.
No.
Now, if you're watching this video, it's probably because you're one of the people who only subscribe because of my Steven Universe video, so before we begin, I just have a little announcement. I'll be making a sort of sequel to that, but I need a bit of help. So if you're interested, contact me on Twitter or email me, and all I really need from you is a few people who are willing to read a few lines of text. I need somewhere between 30 and 60, and literally all I need from you is just to have a working microphone, because I have no standards, just like the people who make Star vs. the Forces of Evil. Alright, it's actually not that bad. Since I made that Steven Universe video, I have been getting a lot of comments telling me things like, if you hated Steven Universe, you're gonna love Star vs. the Forces of Evil, or if you hated Steven Universe, you're really going to hate Star vs. the Forces of Evil. And people were sort of right. I watched the show and there are a lot of similarities between these two shows that I'll try to sort of compare and contrast throughout this video. And so, having watched the show, I said that I would make a video, and now I'm making it because I have no free will of my own. I'm just a monkey, here for your entertainment. Come watch me dance and throw shekels at me like a stupid dirty whore. Okay, I've calmed down. I'm calm now. The point is that Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a very interesting show in terms of its audience. It's both well liked by the greasy pillow fuckers of 4chan's Co. and by the rainbow-haired penis repellents of Tumblr. So what do I think of the show? Well, look, if you're expecting the sort of fire and brimstone criticism that I had for Steven Universe, I'm sorry to disappoint. It's not that bad. However, it does have some major problems, mainly with its plot and with the writers trying to shovel in some shit into the show that doesn't really belong there. But let's start with the positives. Well, the animation is pretty bouncy and fluid. I sort of like it. The quality differs between the various animation studios that they outsource to, but none of them are so drastically worse than the others that it becomes a problem. However, there are a lot of animation errors. Like really a lot. Any individual episode is bound to have at least like a dozen of them. Things being the wrong color, objects changing distance between shots, Star's leggings being constantly in a state of flux and flickering in and out of reality at any given moment. Things like that. They're small, but once you start noticing them, you can't really stop. Just as an example, let me show you one that I found myself. Now, look here, look at this episode. In this episode, Star goes through a sort of interdimensional puberty or something that causes her to grow these little hearts on her face that are akin to zits. Now in this shot, here they are, right around her lip, right? Now in the next shot, they're gone. They're gone and they need to reappear. Now, this isn't a huge error, but it's worth noting that I found this watching someone else's compilation of Star vs. the Forces of Evil animation mistakes. And there were just so many of them that even this guy who was actively looking for them missed one that was right in front of his face. Oh, and it's also worth pointing out that when people go through puberty on Star's dimension, it turns them into superpowered rapists for like 24 hours. It's never really clear if this only happens to Star's family or absolutely everyone else. I think that's just a plot hole, but kinda creepy. Oh, hold on. Before we move on, there's actually one more just absolutely amazing animation mistake that I can't believe actually made it into the show, okay? So, in the episode where Mark gets kidnapped, there's like this 1 second where, wait, let me back up, okay? There's an episode in early season 1 where Marco's arm gets turned into a sort of tentacle monster, And at the end of that episode, it says something like it will be forever inside him, and it's sort of framed like a joke, but also as a maybe future plot story sort of thing, okay? But then, at the start of the episode where Marco gets kidnapped, he briefly looks at his arm, and then we cut to a clip of the monster living inside him, and you think that means that it's going to be brought up again throughout this episode. Like, you think that this plotline is about to become relevant again, but it never does. They just cut to it, cut away, and the next time we hear about it is in season 3, where someone briefly mentions that, hey, remember that time you had an arm that became a hentai monster that the girls were tripping over to try to get groped by?
I wanted to be my boyfriend.
Me too!
And then Marco just kinda looks at his hand for a second, and he looks kinda concerned, and that's it. We never hear about it again. It's like they want this to be an actual plotline at some point, but everyone already forgot about this episode years ago, and they also keep forgetting that they want to do this, so they just kinda once in a while shoehorn a little reminder that this might happen at some point in the worst way possible. I mean, how do you fuck this up this badly? Seriously. They hint at a future development, forget about it, accidentally storyboard it into a later episode, let it go all the way through animation, voice acting, production, gets aired on television, and it doesn't make sense. Anyway, it's hard to tell how much of these animation issues are the crew's fault for sending bad storyboards to the studio that actually animates the show, or not communicating clearly enough what is it that they want, and how much of it is the studio itself fucking up. But compared to Steven Universe, where the storyboards can't even be asked to keep the characters the same size from scene to scene, this is passable, even if Steven Universe is a really low bar to set. But speaking of Steven Universe, maybe the reason that the animation in Star vs. the Forces of Evil is so much better than in Steven Universe, despite Sugar herself being a better artist than Nafsi, is maybe because Nafsi makes new animators actually pass a test to prove that they're good enough to work on the show, by having them storyboard a scene, whereas Rebecca Sugar literally hires just friends and random people online, and the only qualification she's looking for is them being transgender. And sure, the Star storyboards don't hold a candle to the ones of something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but still, this compares better to this than this does to this. Or to this. Those are real storyboards from the new Thundercats. And since I brought up Sugar's hiring practices again, let's be clear here for a moment. Both of these women are from similar political backgrounds. Both draw in the CalArt style, even though only one of them, Nafsi, actually went there. And hell, Star vs. the Forces of Evil is actually situated in California, as far as I can tell. Which might explain why the Diaz family hasn't been deported yet.
Ice!
And Nafsi, like Sugar, seems to go out of her way to try to play diversity bingo with her hiring, bragging that she has a nearly 50-50 split when it comes to her employees' sex. However, because she, unlike Sugar, tries to hire people who are actually trained for what she is hiring them for and not completely incompetent at it, while going out of her way to find diversity hires contributes absolutely nothing to the show. Unlike Steven Universe, this isn't so counterproductive that it actively damages the show. At least, not too much. Some of these animation errors would probably not appear if she actually just hired whoever's the most qualified. And speaking of diversity hires, this leads me naturally to the show's voice acting. And it's pretty good. Yeah, it's actually not that bad. Especially Eden Sher, who does a perfect job as the show's protagonist Star Butterfly, and ew. The only thing she's really bad at is pretending to cry, which thankfully only happens like twice in the entire show. I mean, just listen to this.
Acting.
Yeah, that's what crying sounds like. But it's not just her. A lot of the voice cast is actually pretty impressive. They have Alan Tudyk voicing Ludo, Greg Griffin voicing about half the female cast, and they have Jeffrey Tambor. You know, Jeffrey Tambor? You know, that guy from the show Transparent. That great progressive show about the trans guy that teaches trans acceptance. Yeah, that one. He voices Glossaryck. Wait a minute. What's this? He's not voicing Glossaryck anymore. I wonder what could have possibly happened. Oh no. A progressive feminist man turning out to be a sexual predator. When has that ever happened before? It's simply unheard of. Hey, watch this scene.
If I go like this, with both of my arms, down goes my bath towel.
Glossary?
You think Jeffrey wrote that one himself? Anyway, let's move on to the plot and characters. None of this is too amazing, but none of it is completely awful. The story, like a lot of shows, has a bit too much filler in it, shoved right in the middle of important plot lines. Like, we're on the brink of the season 3 finale, and the show just stops dead in its tracks to waste everyone's time with a very special episode where Star learns the importance of being patient. Even though this lesson will never be brought up again, will not change her character in any way and turn her into a less of a horrible person, and this is the worst possible moment to learn this lesson because it is the only time in the entire show where Star is being obnoxious over something that is actually urgent. Which brings me to my next point. Star is awful. I mean, Star is fucking terrible. Apart from her voice being really annoying, which isn't even acting because that's actually just how Eden Sher talks, she's rude, loud, stupid, self-absorbed, impatient, weirdly bitchy sometimes, and just an overall giant cunt. She's constantly in trouble because she never listens when anyone around her talks, she treats Marco like a servant half the time, and is just like an overall compulsive, selfish sociopath. And I can't even figure out if this is supposed to be normal in her dimension or not. She gets sent to Earth because she's too wild, but she doesn't seem wild. She seems stupid. The first season follows a sort of fish out of water story where she doesn't understand how things work on Earth, and coupled with Muni's culture being different, that sort of makes this forgivable. But then she goes back to Muni, and it's hard to tell if how she acts is considered only slightly out of the ordinary on her home planet, or if she's a bitch there too, or if it's completely normal because half the people there are just as stupid and annoying. I mean, here, just look at some clips.
I can't. I have karate.
To a better store near us!
Did you hear anything I just said?
A little bit of banana, a little lot of magic. They go. Blah, blah,
What are you guys doing looking through my wallet anyway? Can a guy get any privacy?
Nope.
Start with the first one. Now, how about this one?
What?
Money.
Excuse me?
What? Money.
Gimme.
Now come on, where is it?
Oh! Found it. Hello? Hola, Marco. It's Grandma.
I know it's not very princess-like to show up late, but did you see traffic on the Royal Mile?
Hey! I am on the phone!
Okay.
Fine. Fine.
Whatever. Fine.
Bye! Now go make me some nachos.
Am I wrong? Is she not completely awful? She's like Mabel from Gravity Falls, but with magic powers, making it like a million times worse. You wanna know how bad she is? Okay, first 3 minutes of the first episode of season 1. Her mom tells her,
If it falls into the hands of evil forces, the universe could be destroyed.
this thing in her book give people the power to destroy reality itself. But throughout the show, she loses it, breaks it, forgets to charge it and almost destroys it in the process, forgets it in general, leaving it at home to be chewed on by her temporarily retarded friend, and gives it away. The only thing she hasn't done yet is try to use it as a dildo and get it stuck. And it's just stuff like that in every episode. She treats everyone around her like trash, waits for Marco to be in a relationship to tell him she loves him, then starts dating her abusive ex-boyfriend that almost killed Marco, and then makes out with Marco while they're still dating. She causes property damage, she puts everyone in danger, she uses a major holiday on Muni to sing a song where she reveals state secrets to the entire kingdom that she was specifically told to keep to herself, and causes a fucking riot. A riot which, by the way, is immediately forgotten in the next episode and is never brought up again because if Star's actions had any consequences, then she'd have to stop being so awful. But I think the best example of what a little shit Star can be is the episode where Star and Moon are on the run and are trying to get to a hidden sanctuary, and the entire episode is just Star doing the exact opposite of anything her mom tells her, ignoring the fact that Moon is obviously under a lot of stress and almost getting them killed over and over again by acting without thinking. Moon goes, hey, don't use magic, but she uses magic anyway. Hey Star, don't start a fire because our enemies will detect us. No, she starts a fire. Star, don't make noise or they'll literally kill us. Oops, making noise. Just this, over and over throughout the entire episode. I remember just watching this episode and thinking to myself,
you stupid bitch.
What am I supposed to be getting out of this? That she's brave? That she's independent? She's
A strong, independent warrior princess.
Because what I'm really getting out of it is that I absolutely hate her, and that's a bit of a problem because she's the main fucking character. But Nefsi tries to give her villains some depth by not making them just pure evil, which is nice, okay? I mean, too bad she doesn't extend this thought to all the rest of the characters in the show who are just completely one note, but it's nice. Marco's a really interesting example of this too, because his main character trait is that he's safe. Only he isn't. We establish in the first episode that he is the safest kid in school by another character just dumping this information on us in a way that no real human being would. And then his actions already contradict this by the end of the first episode. Okay, so now that we've talked about everything in the show that's good or okay, let's talk about my first major problem: plot holes. This show has so many dangling plot threads that you can make them into a noose and hang yourself. In Star vs. the Forces of Evil, things just happen. They don't happen for a reason, they don't happen because of cause and effect, they can't be explained, they just sort of happen. Everything that happens because of magic, and the reason magic does stuff is, it just works. It just works, okay? It just works. Here's a basic outline of a typical season of Star vs. the Forces of Evil that I've come up with, okay? Step 1. Star acts like a cunt. Step 2. Problems happen because Star acts like a cunt. Step 3. What the fuck is going on? The magic dimension caused it somehow. Step 4. The problem is solved. The magic dimension solved it somehow. And that's it. That's a season. Gloucester came back to life? Magic did it. Moon loses half of her soul but then washing her face grows it back? Magic did it. Marco's parents named their second son by the exact same name as their first. Magic did. No, that was just retarded. Okay, but how does magic work? Why are half of Star's spells just her pelting her enemies with garbage? Why can she do literally anything with magic but never does anything? What are the rules? How does magic work? How does magic work? How does Okay, I'm calm. I'm relaxed. Okay. But let's get to an actual example, okay? Let's get to the first gigantic plot hole that I have a problem with. So here's a question for you. What was Toffee's plan, and how the hell did it work? Let's go through this. Toffee takes over Ludo's castle, he steals Star's wand, somehow he knows how it can be destroyed. Let's let that aside for a moment. Somehow, he also knows what will happen when it's destroyed. No one else does, because everyone assumes he's dead. So he blows himself up, and that, for some reason, transports him into the wand. For some reason, and this is never explained, for some reason, Toffee becomes trapped inside the wand, which, for some reason, is also interchangeably the magic dimension whenever the plot needs it to be. The wand breaks in half, and for some reason, the other half flies all the way to the other side of Muni. For some reason, Toffee's arm is grasping the missing part of the wand, even though it wasn't holding it neither when it exploded or when the wand fragments are first shown. For some reason, the arm does not regenerate into a full body even though we know that it can. For some reason, Toffee's finger that has been incinerated 30 years ago in a completely unrelated incident is inside the other half of the wand, even though it has no reason to be there because we've seen it destroyed, and this is also never explained. Somehow, Ludo finds the wand with the hand around it, and that, for some reason, gives Toffee the power to control him. Toffee tricks Ludo into reading the dark chapter of the magic book, which, for some reason, gives him the power to take over Ludo completely, and for some reason, Toffee being in the magic soup that's inside the wand allows him to corrupt it and control it and not have a physical body. Later, being inside the wand doesn't have the same effect on Star for some reason. And for some reason, Toffee knew that all of that would happen and that he could do that. And wanting to do that is the only part of his plan that makes any logical sense, because wanting to disable magic is the only way he could possibly beat the royal family who uses magic, except it actually isn't. But let's get to that later, okay? What doesn't make any logical sense is that for some reason, Star somehow realizes that blowing herself up sends you into the wand and decides to do that. Toffee had no part in this and had no way of knowing that she would do that. Nonetheless, it's treated as if it was part of his plan all along, and for this reason, he chooses that this moment is the perfect time to fully regenerate, which apparently he could have done at any point at will. And then, for no reason, he forces Queen Moon to give him back his severed finger and reattaches it. This accomplishes nothing. It is never explained why he's so desperate to get that part of his finger back, or how he knew that it would appear in the other part of the wand, or that Star had it, despite being visibly destroyed in a previous episode. Nonetheless, he reattaches it, nothing changes as a result, and everyone acts as if all hope is lost. Even though all that really changed is that now he can more dexterously pick his nose and maybe flip them the bird. Okay, so while I was editing, I noticed I made two small mistakes that I'm adding this little addendum to correct. First of all, I noticed that Toffee's finger actually doesn't disintegrate, it disappears. But this only adds more questions, like, for example, why did his finger only start corrupting the wand now, and how the hell would Eclipsa's spell work if whenever you used it on someone it would destroy magic in all of the universe? So this doesn't really solve anything. The second thing I noticed is that Toffee first gets his finger back and then regenerates. The way it's edited makes it look as if he needed the finger to regenerate, but if you stop to think about it for literally 1 second, you realize that looks cool but still doesn't make any sense. With none of these questions answered, it leads me directly to my next gaping plot hole, which is, how is Eclipsa free again? So again, follow my train of thought here. Moon makes a magic contract with Eclipsa that gives her the power to kill the immortal lizard army in exchange for Eclipsa's freedom. We don't hear the terms of the deal, but we know that the magic that they used will automatically free Eclipsa once her side of the bargain is complete. Okay? Okay. So, why is she free? The deal was that she will give Moon a magic spell that is the only thing that can kill that army, and when she uses it on Toffee and he dies, Eclipsa will go free. Okay? Okay. Moon uses the spell, but misses. Toffee is still alive, and the contract seems to have not been completed. Okay? Okay. Then Star, somehow, Deus Ex Machinas herself out of the wand in a new Super Saiyan form, and then melts Toffee, even though there is no reason for her to have the ability to do that. Okay? Alright. Toffee is wounded, but still alive, and not able to regenerate the parts that were hit by the spell, similarly to how he couldn't regenerate his finger when Moon put a spell on it. Then, Ludo drops a rock on him, killing him instantly and seemingly freeing Eclipsa. Okay? No, not okay. Why was Star's magic able to stop Toffee from regenerating if it suggested that only Eclipsa's spell could have done that? Why, if there is a magic spell that can kill regenerating lizard people, why was this deal with Eclipsa even necessary? Why was a rock able to kill Toffee if Star's spell never hit his heart, which is what Eclipsa told Moon to do? By the show's logic, he could still be able to regenerate every other part of his body except the ones that were affected by the spell and should still be alive. Was it because Ludo needed some closure for his stupid ass arc, and the writers just pulled something out of her ass so that it'd feel like Ludo grew as a character, even if the second you think about it, you realize that what he did required no effort on his part and shouldn't even work? Is that the reason? So again, why is Eclipsa free? Their contract wasn't fulfilled. Toffee was killed by someone else using a different magic spell and technically should still be alive. Was the contract simply that she will be free once Toffee is dead? Then why didn't Moon check if Toffee was free when he was trapped inside the wand and everyone thought he died? Why didn't anyone even believe that he died if they know he can regenerate, and why didn't anyone know that he can be sent into the wand? But I'm repeating myself, okay? So why wasn't she out of the crystal when Toffee was inside the wand? I mean, how dead does he have to be? As a matter of fact, why didn't Moon just crystallize Toffee when she first met him? The High Commission was on her side. They could have just frozen his entire army. Why not send them to a different dimension, or imprison them or something else? Were there no other spells in the book, a book that can bend reality by the way, that are capable of incapacitating her enemies without killing them? I mean, clearly there are, we see them throughout the show, but that never comes up. And how long does it take these guys to regenerate anyway? Why do some of them do it in like a second and others take months to do it? Why didn't they just, I don't know, beat Moon to death right there and there on the battlefield? None of this is explained. Things just happen. So no, Eclipsa isn't freed because her contract was terminated. Eclipsa is freed because the staff wrote himself into a corner and it was time for the plot to move on. And it's also time for me to move on to my final massive plot hole factory. Now this one isn't exactly a specific plot line, it's more the entire undercurrent of a social narrative in the show, which is a complete broken mess. So get this, the show has this underlying theme of monsters being victims of racism and analogous to a mishmash of different human races whenever the narrative needs them to be one of them. Generally speaking, the humans discriminate against monsters, segregate them, kill them, and don't share their corn with them using a big wall.
USA! USA!
This could be interesting, but sadly, none of it makes a lot of sense. So let's try to puzzle this out for a second. In the episode Mundependence Day, Star celebrates Mundependence Day, a holiday commemorating their one-sided massacre of the monsters and the conquering of their land. See, in this allegory, the monsters are Native Americans and the magic is technology. So she pulls out this pop-up history book and explains that hundreds of years ago, her people came to this land on boats and... Hold on, what? They came on boats? Then where did they come from? Where did the boats come from? Where did the people come from? Were they from another continent? Are there other continents on this planet? I mean, from what I can tell, I thought Muni was just one big giant planet. Do other humans live across the sea that aren't related to the plot of the show? Or did they just sail in from another dimension? And then if they did sail in from a different dimension, then you have to ask this. Are there humans on different dimensions that aren't related to the show? Maybe they just lived at sea prior to this, or maybe they just materialized out of thin air. But let's move on. So even though this episode tells us that the humans destroyed the monsters in a war years ago, at the beginning of Moon's flashback episode, the war is still going on. So there's clearly a bit of inconsistency here. And then at the end of the episode, it seems to imply that Moon committed a genocide against them. It's not very clear, but it's kind of awful. However, in all other non-flashback episodes, Moon and everyone else just acts as if the war has been over for centuries. Then there's the question of what is a monster? I mean, humans and monsters are constantly seen interacting with each other. A lot of creatures that are clearly not human aren't discriminated against, and the human kingdom has diplomatic relations with other races who have their own kingdoms and are clearly not human but also aren't treated as monsters. Hell, no one even bats an eye at the fact that Star used to date a guy who's from, well, hell. Even though it's unclear if hell is actually hell or not, because you get there not with dimensional scissors, but by going directly downwards, whether you're on Earth or on Muni. And throughout this show, no one even gives this guy a dirty look, except for a specific moment when the show suddenly remembers that he's a monster and suddenly needs this to be relevant to the plotline. I mean, no one even cares that the princess of the royal family dated a monster, even though Eclipsa is treated as evil by everyone in the show for the exact same reason. They even give her a little nickname, Monster Love.
Because she's a monster lover.
This question hangs over the entire show for 2 seasons before they try to address it without actually answering it at the start of one episode in season 3, treating it like a joke instead of a major plot hole. Star runs into her mom's room with a big diorama and begins asking, so are the ponyheads monsters? Are these pigeon people monsters? Are these fish people monsters? Are the High Commission monsters? And let me add to these questions, are these humans with spider bites monsters? Are these creatures from other dimensions monsters? Would monster princesses that come from the reform school be treated as royalty on Muni or as monsters? Do these rules apply to monsters in other dimensions? Like, if humans go to a different dimension, do they discriminate against the monsters there? Or is it sort of a when in Rome, do as the Romans do sort of situation? Do other humans in other dimensions discriminate against monsters? Do humans get discriminated by monsters in monster dimensions? It really... Who knows? Certainly not the show. This show just blows past all these questions, and since there is no way of answering them, I guess I'll do the same. The next time we seriously delve into this topic is the episode where Moon is staying in Buff Frog's house. This is the episode that makes me think that maybe this show isn't as bad as it could be. See, while trying to pass the time, Buff Frog suggests they play some of his anti-human board games, eventually settling on one where you have to defend your babies from being eaten by the humans, and Moon responds that monsters are actually the ones who eat babies. Wait a second. Baby eating blood libels, being kept in a ghetto away from food, a racist board game. Okay, so in this allegory, the monsters are just Jews. This is clearly Judenraus.
Oy, oy, oy.
But anyway, the reason I say this show isn't as bad as it could be is that at least it acknowledges that both monsters and humans are racist towards each other, as opposed to Steven Universe, where the underlying message is that gems are space Nazis and there is nothing redeemable about them. So at least they get some points for that. Finally, all of this culminates in the stupidest way imaginable. After Star tries to end anti-monster racism by hiring Buff Frog to work at the castle and getting the other kingdoms to sign a treaty saying that they want to improve relations with them, she wakes up one day to find that all the monsters are leaving. And by all, I mean the 7 or 8 that they bothered to draw. And it's not actually all of them, or at least it's not clear if it's all of them, because in the next episode you see a monster just roaming around. So, not very clear. So none of this makes any sense, okay? First of all, where did they get dimensional scissors? Sometimes the show treats these as a rare resource, and you have to be worthy for Hakapo to give you a pair. In fact, Marco spends 16 years trying to get them, which, by the way, makes him 40 years old, and his relationship with Star is very creepy. And sometimes, like right now, people just have them, because the plot needs them to. It's never clear how many dimensions there are or how hard it is to travel between them. Most of the times, it seems so easy that other dimensions might as well be in other parts of the same country. And other times, parts of Muni look so alien that I just assumed they were in other dimensions until I was informed otherwise. It doesn't help either that dimensional scissors can be used to move from place to place within the same dimension, or that things like Star's wand have batteries that need to be bought at a separate dimension, which is just a giant interdimensional department store, which makes interdimensional travel seem mundane and unimportant. And this all begs the question of, if going to other dimensions is so damn easy, why don't humans conquer those dimensions too? Or how is moving there preventing humans from discriminating against monsters if they can just follow them there and keep treating them like shit? Also, it brings up the question of why haven't the monsters left before? I mean, they have been getting oppressed and starved and slaughtered by them for centuries, but the moment that the heir to the throne seems to be trying to change that, they decide that now's the time to just fuck off, which is as easy as walking across the fucking street. But hey, at least Star got rid of all the swamp Mexicans.
USA! USA!
This metaphor is so broken. In one episode where they try to liken monster discrimination to black discrimination by the police, what happens is a bunch of monsters get arrested for being involved in a party, but the humans who were at that same party are ignored. So then Star goes to the police, knights in this case, and asks them, hey, why are you arresting these guys but not these guys? Then the camera changes to the people they're not arresting, and Look at this picture. Every single person in this picture is a part of a royal family. Of course they're not being arrested. And guess what? Half of them are fucking monsters. So it's clearly not monster discrimination. And you know what's even worse? You know what really undermines all of this? That monsters are monsters. They're actually bad. Virtually every bad guy in this show, more or less, has been a monster. Ludo is a monster, Toffee is a monster, Tom is only half monster, but his monster half turns him into a violent psychopath. Meteora is only half monster, but the monster half makes her rampage through Muni, destroy almost all of it, and suck out everyone's souls. Eclipsa is human, but her actions are painted as justifiable, and the way that the recent season ends makes it look like they're about to fuck this up again by making her monster husband the evil one again. How are you gonna sit there and tell me that the humans are wrong for wanting to apartheid the monster race if integrating them is fucking impossible because their genetics are so toxic that even being half monster turns you into a danger to society?
Have a little faith, Star. I'm a monster. You're a human. If we can make it work, then there's hope for everyone. Wah, wah.
Is this intentional or not? I'm really not getting this. Is Napsy secretly a mod on R the Red Pill?
On my 10th birthday, I put Noxy frogs in all the servants' beds. Feels good, man.
Now, at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, this is a kid show. Why are you getting so worked up about it? But, is it really? I mean, does it want to be a kid show? It certainly doesn't act like it. After all, if it is a show just for kids, why are these topics even in there in the first place? And if it's a show for a more adult audience, why aren't they done well? And so now it's time for me to add yet another layer to the central thesis of these cartoon videos I've been making, where I explain things that seem obvious to me but apparently are not obvious, and I need to continue to get into ever more granular details about them, explaining them only to have people then baffled by what I said and ask me the exact same question I just answered in the comment section. So here we go again, okay? You can't make a product meant for adults, market it towards kids, and then when it doesn't work because what you've made is bad, hide behind, hey, it's just for kids. It doesn't have to adhere to any standards, you're not allowed to criticize it, you're too old. I can't make a gun for kids. I can't make a gun for kids by painting a malfunctioning Colt revolver pink, and then, when it inevitably backfires into some kid's face, and adults come to me to complain because 8-year-olds can't act as their own consumer advocates, I can't tell them to fuck off and stop being angry at a kid's toy. It's not a toy, it's a gun. Its quality should be judged the same way that any gun is judged. It doesn't belong in the hands of children, and if you're going to give it to children, it deserves more scrutiny, not less. When I said in my Mr. Enter video that adults shouldn't be watching and seriously reviewing SpongeBob, I got a lot of comments from retarded man-children outraged at this notion. But I'm still right, and they're still wrong. SpongeBob is a real kids show. It's made for kids, it clearly has kids in mind, and it is appropriate for someone with the mental capacity of a child. If you're going to seriously examine it, you should do it with that in mind, as something you look at from the perspective of its target audience and ask yourself, is it good for them or not? Not something you look at through the eyes of an adult and then get outraged when it doesn't meet your own standards. By contrast, if a show like Star is going to have an adult theme, even if it doesn't slip into the realm of pure propaganda like Steven Universe does, then it should be judged both from the perspective of an adult audience, because it isn't meant for kids in the first place, and from the view of a child to see if this sort of theme has been adjusted to fit a very young audience that is going to end up watching it. Inserting heavy social narratives into the show and having it filled with mile-wide plot holes and inconsistencies that will be watched by an audience that shouldn't be exposed to them in a way that is not age-appropriate, if at all, can then be brushed away with, it doesn't have to make sense, it's for kids. If it's a serious topic, it needs to be treated seriously, and it shouldn't be directed at children, and if it still is directed at children, it still needs to meet the exact same standards, at least. So this leads me to my final issue with the show, which is similar to the main issue I had with Steven Universe, but a little bit different. So it would surprise no one if I told them that Darren Nafsi is a far leftist, right? I mean, look at this tweet. Is it not the cringiest shit you've seen in your life? And this, of course, manifests itself as ham-handed injections of politics into the show. I'm not talking about the racism narrative, which is fine, or at least it would be fine if it was done correctly. No, I'm talking about the other stuff. Right from the first second of the first episode, we get this.
Some people have called me reckless and irresponsible just because I fight monsters and tame wild unicorns. I fight monsters. I fight monsters.
I fight monsters!
Now, this isn't so bad. After all, it's the start of the first episode and we need a hook. And honestly, the political stuff isn't as frequent or as bad, especially not in the first season. Actually, in the first season, there's some pretty interesting stuff. Here's Marco. Marco is Mexican. Here's Marco's house. And here is Star turning a Mexican boy into a piñata.
Oh yeah!
And then he gets beat up by people with baseball bats.
Oh, yeah!
Hey Star, make Muni great again. Okay, some more examples. Jenna is a sexual predator. She's like really creepy. And no one bats an eye at this. Marco dresses as a girl. An entire crowd cheers for him dressing as a girl. There's a group opposing Ludo that calls itself the Resistance, but I'm not sure if this is an intentional jab at Trump. If it is, it's pretty apt because the Resistance in Star vs. the Forces of Evil is characterized by being a bunch of whiny pretentious artists who try to topple a regime with shitty art. Aside from Marco, I found a mention in the Star Wiki that one of Muni's previous queens was called the Boy Princess, and then there's more subtle stuff like the time that Marco tells Tom that he's a prince and therefore not allowed to not care about politics because everything he does is political. And in a later episode, Tom explains to a crowd of monsters that being infinitely rich and powerful and the ruler of an entire kingdom doesn't stop him from being racially discriminated against, even though there is a moment in the show where we see that that is clearly not true.
Hey, over there! That goes for you too! Monster! Oh, Prince Lucidor, sorry, sir. Please don't incinerate my shop.
I won't get into details about the last 2 points I just brought up, but people who are familiar with the stuff can recognize the common far left talking points that these two examples are hinting at. Also, in a recent episode, Star is desperately looking for advice on what she should do from her knights after her own incompetence has brought the entire kingdom to the brink of ruin. She got a giant monster destroying the kingdom, she kicked out the Magic High Commission because she's mad at them over something, and then she turns to her knights asking them what to do before they're all destroyed. And then one of them calls her babyface, so she shoots him.
What's up, baby girl?
What did you call me?
Baby girl.
How dare you!
Oh my god, what a stupid bitch. What a stupid bitch she is.
All of this, though, pales in comparison to what I think has to be the cringiest moment in the history of television. You want to see it? You want to see the cringiest shit ever on TV? Want to see it? Okay, I'll show you. So in this episode, they're playing a sort of variant of Truth or Dare with magic involved. They talk to this magic box, it asks a question, it knows if someone is lying, and if they do, it kills them. Okay? So the box asks them what their favorite color is, and check this out.
I love pink. It's my favorite.
True!
Pink!
I just hate contributing to gender stereotypes.
Jana likes pink and fights the patriarchy.
Oh god, that is just bad. But what really brought some attention to the show over these issues is the gay kiss incident. So in one episode, there are a number of gay couples kissing in the background. Most of them are small and not noticeable, and the one that got the most attention was this one, even though I'm not really sure that these are both men because one of them looks like a gay lumberjack, but this one This one sort of looks like Rebecca Sugar. In any case, there was some pressure from parents groups and Disney quietly removed this episode from circulation for a time. Some retarded cartoon reviewers were outraged and tried to create a hashtag about it, but the 3 most popular videos about this barely even broke 100,000 views, and no one cared about their sad little protest. Nonetheless, they eventually did bring back this episode because what were they going to do? They were waiting for the controversy to die down because there was a major plot point in this episode and they already paid money to produce it. They weren't going to leave it offline forever. Let's be honest here. Okay, so here's a second little addendum I need to add. While I was looking for pictures of the hashtag Justice for Star to put on the screen to show everyone how little anyone cared about this, I realized a very important thing. Half of the tweets using this hashtag were actually about this topic, and the other half were about a news story about a 2-year-old girl who got beaten and raped, and the fucking cartoon reviewers reappropriated this hashtag to complain about Disney not allowing them to watch men making out on a children's cartoon show. And even better than that, the main person complaining about this was the same guy who harassed the 8-year-old kid dying of cancer because he got to watch the new Steven Universe episodes early that I talked about in a Steven Universe video. My conclusion is basically that all cartoon YouTubers belong in a gas chamber. In general though, it seems like NAFC and the network have been locking horns over this from basically day one. I mean, even before the show started, Disney forced Darren to add 2 male characters to the show so that Marco can have some male friends. But the characters were so stupid and annoying that after 1 season, they stopped showing up. And my personal guess is that NAFC did this intentionally. I think she intentionally made these 2 characters so annoying that the network would just tell her to cut them, which is not an unheard of practice in the industry. Then there was the gay kiss fiasco, and shortly after this, the show's director Sabrina, who, by the way, has pinned a tweet on her Twitter to inform people that she's mixed race and gay, because that's what she has instead of an actual personality. Sabrina tweeted this. Okay, Disney is not Cartoon Network, and Darren Nafsi is not Rebecca Sugar. The mouse isn't gonna let her do anything that hurts their brand. And after this little stunt that she pulled, I guess that they're probably keeping a closer eye on her to stop this shit from ever happening again. However, this has not stopped the beginning of a retarded fanbase to sort of coalesce around this show. One that insists that Marco is transsexual and draws him as a black woman with hairy legs. This is a little insulting, isn't it? I mean, you're implying that transsexual women are just hairy dudes in dresses. There's also the beginning of the usual dick sucking that this sort of show receives from online hobbyist press. One particularly funny article that I found insists that, quote, one character, StarFan13, openly and not for any other interpretation, admits that she has a crush on Star, end quote. Which is really great because StarFan13 is characterized as a creepy stalker, so again, very respectful. The article continues and goes on to say, quote, there is a lot of innuendo pointing towards Jana being bisexual. There isn't. I mean, she even wears a beanie, so come on. So that's where bisexuals come from. The second you put on a beanie, you become a gigantic faggot. But okay, before we continue, let me clarify something for a second before I get accused of this. My problem isn't that the show is pushing the staff's left-wing political views on the children. My problem is that anyone is pushing any political views onto children. I would have just as much of a problem with the show if it was made by Republicans that sneaked an anti-immigration message into it. I would have just as much of a problem with this show if it was made by atheists trying to sneak an anti-religion message into it. I would have just as much of a problem with this show if it was about a yellow snake named Gadsden that teaches kids about property rights. Actually, I might watch that. But it isn't just the political stuff. Star goes far beyond that. Let's talk about Tom for a moment. Tom is Star's ex-boyfriend who suffers from anger management issues in a way that seems to indicate he may have been abusive in a previous relationship. In the first episode he is introduced, he is going through anger management treatment, but by the end of it he loses control again, and the episode concludes in a way that seems to imply that there is no hope for him, or that there is no point in trying to give him a second chance because he is just a bad person that can never be fixed, which is really nice, really a great message. Especially coupled with the episode's other moral, which is Marco getting chewed out by Star for following her to the party that she went with her abusive ex-boyfriend to make sure that she's okay. Because remember kids, if your female friend decides to go out alone with her violent ex-boyfriend, don't worry about it. It's better to let her get killed than to risk her feeling like she's not a
strong, independent warrior princess.
I am Star Butterfly, an independent woman with fists like hammers.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
Tom appears on the show a few more times after that, acting as a minor villain, before he and Star start dating again after she loses interest in Marco. Soon after, Star kisses Marco and hides it from Tom because Star is an awful character. On their face, these themes already seem a bit too adult for the show's target demo, which the closest I could find to an official source on put the age range at about 6 to 11. I mean, how many first graders need to learn about the healthy way to handle a bad breakup without turning into a wife beater? But it gets even worse when you find out that Nafsi has said in an interview that Tom is a composite of all of her ex-boyfriends. So what is this? Is this a cartoon for kids or Darren Nafsi's private therapy session? Did her ex-boyfriend used to slap her around or something? What is any of this doing in a children's show for 11-year-olds? And this isn't even the only example. There's also Kelly and Tad, a couple that keeps breaking up and getting back together. Now Tad lives inside of Kelly's head and refuses to move out. Then it all really comes to a head in the 3rd season finale, when the villain that is currently destroying Muni hits Kelly on the head and Tad falls out of it. Then Kelly gets into an argument with him about why hasn't he moved out yet. At that point, Kelly breaks into a melodramatic speech about not being able to get over him because he just won't move out. This goes on for nearly a minute and a half before the bad guy that has seemingly been ignoring them even though they're right in the killing field and could have shot them at any moment, decides to shoot her, finishing her boring venting session. So was this a joke? It didn't feel like a joke, it wasn't funny. At the end of it, there's a half-hearted attempt to make it funny by having Tad talk in a silly voice for a second to justify its existence, but you know what this scene really feels like? You know what all of this relationship drama feels like? Both between Tad and Kelly and between Tom and whoever else? It feels like this show is being written by immature man-children who are grown enough to date, but not mature enough to act like adults. It feels like these people, and by that I mean half the people making cartoons right now, but Nafsi in particular, are all stuck in this limbo between adulthood and adolescence where they're still obsessed with cartoons but also have to deal with real life problems. So they use their jobs as a substitute for a psychiatrist, or their cartoons as a substitute for a more mature show that they aren't talented enough to write for, or aren't mature enough to be interested in because it doesn't include magic and fairies and Dragon Ball Z fights. And this isn't even limited to Star vs. the Force of Evil. In Adventure Time, there's an entire episode where Finn tries to get over a recent breakup by kissing random chicks to feel better, with the metaphor being obviously that kissing is sex. Why is this in a kid's show? What 12-year-old needs to learn an important lesson about not using rebound sex to deal with bad breakups? What 12-year-old needs to learn to seek professional help from Rageaholics Anonymous because his anger issues are getting him to hit his girlfriend? What 12-year-old is having a problem with his ex not moving out? Why is any of this in the show? Why is any of this in any of these shows? Why are Nafsi's personal relationship issues in full display on Star? Why is Steven Universe's entire staff's extremist political views in their fucking cartoon? Why does Pendleton Ward use Adventure Time as a platform for his insipid entry-level political musings? What is any of this shit? I've seen TV animation go through phases, okay? And this has to be the worst one. Some of this I only saw in reruns because I was too young, but I could still recognize a distinct trend. I've seen early cartoons that tried to instill some sort of basic good morals to kids. They were a bit boring and heavy-handed and heavily influenced by finger-wagging parents groups, but they were harmless, excluding things like, Looney Tunes that were a bit too violent. Then, gradually, cartoons became toy commercials, things like G.I. Joe and Transformers. Fun but exploitative. Then new regulations put an end to that, and networks had to change their business strategy from relying on merchandise to relying on sponsors and selling airtime. And for that, you need ratings. So the content changed from cartoons that were made to educate kids and keep their parents calm to whatever kids wanted to watch, which is often the last thing you want kids to be watching. Girls' cartoons seem to say, well, girls are stupid and shallow, all they care about is shopping and gossip and fashion and boys, so things like Bratz were created to capitalize on that. Meanwhile, for boys, a bunch of violent anime was important from Japan because as long as it's violent and animated in flashing colors, little boys will watch it. And I'm not saying that these things are necessarily bad. I loved things like Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z as a kid, and that didn't turn me into a murderer. I think that there are better cartoons for kids to be watching. I think that parents are responsible for monitoring what their kids watch. I think that parents need to do that instead of petitioning the government or the networks to change their business practices. And I think that even in the worst case scenario, these cartoons' damage would be limited. But that isn't really the issue. I don't even think that this new trend is the most dangerous, but I do think that it's the most disgusting. It's the most shameless and it's the most pathetic. It's the most likely to, in my opinion, indicate that there is something seriously wrong with the people making the cartoons. Let me tell you something. When I was young, I grew up watching a lot of Soviet cartoons. They were reruns on a TV channel that I get in my country. Things like Chiburashka or Nu Zayts Nu Pagadi, and the Russian version of Winnie the Pooh, which is, by the way, completely horrible and horrifying. Anyone here ever see Russian Winnie the Pooh? Let me show you a little bit of him.
Если я чешу в затылке, не беда. В голове моей опилки, да. Но хотят там и опилки, но кричалки и вопилки, а также шумелки, пыхтелки и сопелки. Сочиняю я неплохо иногда. Да.
Okay, enough of that, jeez. My point is this. I like these cartoons, and some years later I watched a documentary about cartoon making in the Soviet Union. I can't find a copy of it right now, but I remember that the people in it were saying that the reason they loved making cartoons so much was it was the only place they could go to escape from politics. That kids' cartoons were made for kids, that they loved what they were doing so much that at the end of every month, whenever they got their paycheck or whatever you got in Soviet Russia, and had to decide whether to each spend their own money on another bottle of vodka or to pull their money collectively together and buy more equipment to make more cartoons, they would buy a new projector or something else every single time. When I asked my mom about this, her comments pretty much mirrored theirs. She said that in Soviet Russia, the propaganda was inescapable. Anything you were doing, you were getting this shit drilled into your head every minute of every day. That everything, everywhere, every job, every school event had something to do with politics. But cartoons? Cartoons were fine. Cartoons were pure. Because even in the hellscape that was the Soviet Union, even the rulers of an oppressive dictatorship realized that kids' cartoons should be made for kids. But today's animators? They don't seem to get that. Something that was obvious to the Soviet Russian regime is not obvious to these people. For them, cartoons are not something you make for kids. It's something you make to shove your own opinions down kids' throats. It's something you make for yourself as an outlet for your ideas that no one wants to let you put in any other show because they're bad and boring, but kids' shows are held to a lower standard, so you can just do that. There's something you use as a coping mechanism to deal with bad breakups, and the little kids who watch it, it's not for them, they're just here along for the ride. It's not something that's really being made for kids. So what's the takeaway from this? What am I trying to say? Is Star a good show? Should you watch it? Well, you're probably an adult, so no, you shouldn't watch it. Or is there no adult entertainment on television for you? Like, is there no, I know, a rerun of Grey's Anatomy or something? Come on. Okay, but what about kids? If you have kids, theoretically, should you let them watch it? Well, yes and no. I can maybe endorse this show right now, but I can't vouch for it in the future. As it continues, the political messaging and inappropriate relationship drama becomes more and more frequent, and honestly, I don't have high hopes for this show. Unless Disney reins the FCC in, this show is going to get worse and worse as time goes on. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget that if you want to participate in my second Steven Universe video, just contact me via email at easypeasysubmit@mail.com or on Twitter at whatever link I put down in the description because I keep getting purged from the site like twice a month. Or just, find me on Discord or on Tumblr, literally anywhere. I get banned from everywhere. Just find me and I'll whatever.